Hello everyone, good to see you. My name is Ank Kleinmeulman. Our website is cwowi.eu, Church Without Walls International. You can go to cwowi.org. That is the bigger website, so to speak. There's you can find a lot more information about house church, there are videos and so on. But go there, and if you want to know find some weekly thoughts of John Venn translated into different languages, you can go to our website cwowi.eu. Okay, today I want to talk to you about comforting one another. We've just had a wonderful weekend with people from 16 or 17 nations coming together, those who are on the same page, who love doing house church, relationship, faith. And it was a wonderful meeting in the presence of the Lord, but also a meeting of comforting one another, strengthening one another. The Holy Spirit, by the way, is the one who comforts us, who strengthened us. That is the word parakaleo, and the Holy Spirit is called the Paraclete. But we are to also comfort one another, strengthen one another, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Well, the Lord gives us comfort in many different ways, and I was wondering, how did it work, in the book of Acts? For instance, how did the Lord comfort the Apostle Paul? Well, you know, of course, that Paul, he and Timothy, for instance, experienced afflictions and distress in ministry. And at a certain point said our body had no rest. We are troubled on every side, outside conflicts, inside fears in 2 Corinthians. And then he tells what brought him comfort. When you need comfort and strengthening, he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 6, but God, who comforts the downcast or one who is low or depressed, comforted us by the coming of Titus. Titus was a person who comforted others. And he says not only by his coming, but also by the comfort with which he was comforted by you. See, Titus was comforted by the Corinthians, and then Titus came to Paul and he comforted Paul, and that is amazing. So meeting face to face is wonderful. Of course, nowadays you have a means, you can go on Zoom or whatever, social media, and that's wonderful. You can comfort one another there too, and here, YouTube. But meeting people face to face, there is so much more than just texting or sending an email. And then he says about Timothy in verse 13, we rejoiced exceedingly more for the joy of Titus because his spirit has been refreshed by you all. And refreshed meaning that is the rest after toil, after care, after things have been hard and difficult. So that is wonderful. So Titus was a wonderful person. But we also have many people in the Bible who are mentioned there that you probably didn't know they were in there, or maybe you just read their names and didn't think about who they were. For instance, Tychius. Have you ever heard of Tychius? He was an Ephesian. He accompanied Paul to Jerusalem. He was well trusted by Paul. You could say he was Paul's personal representative to the churches in Colossae and in Ephesus. And Paul once sent him to Crete as a messenger to Titus. And Titus was sent to comfort the hearts of the people. And in Colossians chapter 4, 7 and 8, it says, Tychius, a beloved brother, a faithful minister, fellow servant in the Lord, he will tell you all the news about me. I'm sending him to you for this purpose, that you may know our circumstances, and he may know your circumstances, how you are, and comfort your hearts. So that is good that you know how people are doing. How are they doing? How are you? And comfort their hearts. There's another person, Barnabas. I know you've heard of Barnabas. He's well known. You can read about him in Acts 4. It says at a certain point that Barnabas sold a piece of land, laid it at the apostles' feet in Acts 4. And Paul was the person, he recommended Paul because the believers were hesitant to take Paul in because he was formerly a persecutor of the church. And in Acts 11, you can see that Gentiles were coming to the Lord in Antioch, and Barnabas remembered to call on Paul's life, so he went to Tarsus to seek Paul, and he brought him to Antioch. So he was not only a comforter, but he was also a bridge builder. He knew who the people were, the call they had on their lives, and he did everything to help them, to encourage them and bring them along. Well, there's another person in the Bible, Stephanus. maybe you have not heard of him, but in 1 Corinthians 16 you can read about him, 15 to 18. So the household of Stephanus, they were the first converts in Achaia. Corinth was the administrative capital of the Roman province of Achaia. And Paul says that he only baptized the household of Stephanus. Then it mentioned that they had devoted themselves to the ministry or the service of the saints. It is amazing. And it was their priority. They devoted themselves to the ministry of the saints. So it was not about them, but they had a heart to help people, to minister to them. It was not about them. Okay, that's wonderful when you have people around you who do not only care about themselves. Of course, we all care about ourselves, right? But their focus was to minister to others. In verse 18 of 1 Corinthians 16, it says that they refreshed my spirit and yours. Isn't that amazing when you come along people and when you know people, when you have people in your life who can refresh you? And refreshing, actually, that is like when it has been on a hot day, when it has been very hot, and someone gives you a cool glass of water, it refreshes you. Or when there is a cool wind or a breeze, that refreshes you. So that is what actually happened, what Stephanus did. He had a heart to refresh the heart of people. And then Paul says, acknowledge those men, so recognize them. They need appreciation and recognition. And maybe they are not well known, but the Lord knows who they are. Well, we have two more names of persons who were comforters, Fortunas, you can read about that in 1 Corinthians 16, meaning blessed, and Achaeus, and those three visited Paul at Ephesus. And and there's another person, Onesiphorus, that's how we would pronounce it in Dutch, I don't know in English, Onesiphorus. He is an underrated saint of the Bible, and his name literally means prophet bringer or useful. Let me see, what can we tell about him? Well, Paul was imprisoned in Rome, awaiting a death sentence. And the majority of believers in Asia who previously supported him deserted him, including two men whose name was Philigius and Hermogenes. And then Onesiphorus came to see Paul in that stuffy dungeon. He just visited him. He was not ashamed of Paul. He was likely a Gentile, given the Greek origin of his name. Okay, let me see, what can I tell you about Onesiphorus? Paul says, he often refreshed me. Again, that word refresh, like cool by blowing. So someone that recovers you to a state of cheer or encouragement after a time of anxiety, of trouble, to encourage you, to cheer you up. It says in verse 17 and 18, when he arrived in Rome, as Onesiphorus, a wonderful person, he sought me out very zealously, and he found me, and the Lord grant to him that he may find mercy from the Lord in that day. And you know very well how many ways he ministered to me in Ephesus. That is what Paul says about him. So you have to know that Paul was not a very popular man to many, to the outside world. While he was in prison, he was a criminal. He was in prison, he was chained. But Onesiphorus was not ashamed of Paul, because he understood the great work Paul was doing for the Lord. And he was, Onesiphorus, he was zealous, he was courageous. And at that time in Rome was a dangerous place for Christians. Nero was emperor. He was notorious for his brutal persecution of Christians. So Christians in Rome were even burned at the stake and offered to lions in the Colosseum. So that was the situation then. Yet Onesiphorus, he sought Paul very zealously until he found him. And despite the risk of being in a hostile environment, the extensive journey he had to make from Ephesus to Rome, he was relentless in his pursuit. They say he had to travel about 800, 900 miles. So in kilometers, that would be around 1,400 kilometer. Can you imagine that you travel 900 miles and you do not have a car or a train or by plane? But he did so because he wanted to see Paul and encourage him. So the Lord brings needed encouragement and refreshment to Paul with the flesh and bone of a person, a personal visit. So Onesiphorus was a refresher. He was an encourager. He was not a deserter. We have another person, Philemon. You probably heard about him. And there's even a book or a letter called that he wrote, Philemon, first 7. It says, yes, brother, let me have joy from you in the Lord and refresh my heart in the Lord. So we have many people who traveled back and forth and who encouraged others, who comforted others, who were like a breath of fresh air after things were hard and difficult. And we all need that. You need that too in your life. And maybe you do not have people around you who are on the same page, spiritually speaking, who live close by you. Well, you can also go on our website, find people there who are on the same page, who can encourage you. There are means nowadays that we can stay in touch because we do need that, okay? And please, I encourage you to be an encourager, to be a person who refreshes others, who's not only concerned about his own or your own needs, but is more concerned about the needs of others, because we do need one another. I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.